focus seems to swing back onto aged care residences and formal care settings and victimisation by paid carers, when really it's going to be someone's son, daughter or grandson that is going to provide them the greatest risk.
And that's complicated and messy, right?
Immensely, absolutely, because you've got an older person who's inherently proud of their sons and their daughters and their granddaughters and what they've achieved, and raised them and tried to teach them the ways of the world and give them values to go ahead and succeed. And all of a sudden they're stealing their home and their possessions, and they're violently assaulting them, or they're preventing them from going to church and seeing their friends or to Rotary, and by cutting off these networks, they isolate them and then exploit them. So the barriers to preventing is terrible, and it's also this perception with policing is that once you call the police, we turn up, we kick down doors, we lock everybody up, we cause a ruckus in this blunt, brutal manner. It's not true.
Either or.
Absolutely. We're quite nuanced now. I think our systems are really mindful of the need to be respectful of the needs and wishes of the person that calls us.
We had an issue recently of a person ringing up a service that was going to mediate for a woman who was in a nursing home, and the nursing home said, you can't come because the power of attorney says you can't have visitors. And they said, well, would you like to test that? We're lawyers. And they went, well, you better come. A power of attorney has no right to restrict an older person having visitors. It's about looking after somebody or assisting somebody to care for their resources, their money, in a way that takes into account the older person's wants and needs and involvement. You shouldn't take away somebody's autonomy.
Are there particular vulnerabilities for the LGBTQI community?
Yes, the particular vulnerability is the deal that was made during their growing up between society and them. You keep quiet about your sexual orientation. You keep it strictly to yourself. Do not confront us with the awful reality of your difference, and we'll leave you alone.
I think the Deputy Prime Minister at one stage said, don't shove it in my face. I think was the expression he used during the marriage equality debate. So that was a reiteration of the deal.
Yes, exactly. And that is in the minds of most LGBTIQ people of my age and 20 years younger than my age. That is what they grew up with. So that as they get older, they have the disadvantage that often they don't have the same family arrangements. They've not been given the same rights to marriage and relationship recognition. They've had to live in isolation and in silence about their relationships, and therefore they internalise the feeling of less worth. So you can change the laws, but that doesn't do the trick. You've got to somehow have people in the aged care help area that will be aware of this particular problem and will be striving to overcome it.
I am looking at 48-year-old women that are grandmothers, thinking they can go back to work, and now they're custodial grandmothers.
So suddenly that they're not looking after the kids, they're bringing up the kids.
Yes, absolutely. And you get a lot of government workers who just assume that the grandmother will take the children if there's a problem in the family. I can't imagine that in the non-Aboriginal community, that non-Aboriginal women who have gone through raising their families would be, the government would go and say, well, you can take the kids now.
You can back up and do it again.
Yes. Not that in our culture it's okay, but then again it's not okay because the pressure is the expectation. So I look at the women I work with and I'm trying desperately to guide them away from a negative ageing experience, because at least if a few of them have gone to university and TAFE, and at least if they've got education, they can think it through and use emotional intelligence as a way to deal with it.
Someone can't just walk in and pretend to represent you as a customer and make transactions on your account. They have to have some form of documentation. But staff often see this unfolding in the branch. They see an elderly person, maybe being spoken to in a way by somebody that would indicate that perhaps this is not an entirely healthy or consensual set of financial arrangements. Where a bank staff member suspects that a document might have been forged, then of course they would notify the police, and the police could take some action.
In a sense, that's the easy circumstance.
That's right. The much harder thing is,
Yeah.
did this person understand what they were giving consent to? Did they understand that the powers that they were giving this person would be used, often to make very large transactions that are depleting the account?
Does age make a particular woman more vulnerable to sexual abuse, or typically have these women been enduring sexual abuse for decades?
I think it's actually a little bit of both. There are older women who've been enduring sexual abuse all their lives. There are some older women who remarry and find themselves in a relationship where the partner's abusive. And that's really that intimate partner abuse. But we know as well too from the research that sexual abuse happens in the context of institutions. So predominantly residential aged care, but also too in acute care, in rehab, in day centres.
What happens?
Largely speaking, it seems to be service provider abuse, sexual abuse by service provider. And then there are stories as well that have been shared with us in the research work that we've done where older women have been sexually assaulted by another resident in a residential aged care facility.